In Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, a family's life took a dark turn, exposing cracks hidden beneath the surface. What looked like an ordinary household masked growing tensions and unspoken struggles. Behind closed doors, a wife faced loneliness, and her father-in-law, a respected family figure, crossed boundaries that should never have been crossed. Their connection grew in secret, unnoticed at first, but the choices they made would eventually lead to irreversible consequences. The tragedy that followed was not just about a single act, it was the result of years of pain, neglect, and betrayal, all building up until it could no longer be contained. Samira and Faisal's marriage began as many traditional unions do, arranged by their families with little time for the couple to truly know each other. In the early days, their life together seemed steady. Samira, just 20 when she married, embraced her role as a wife and later as a mother. Faisal, a hardworking businessman, provided a comfortable life for his family. On the surface, everything seemed fine, but cracks began to show over the years. Faisal's work took priority, leaving him often away on business trips, while Samira managed the household alone. The emotional connection they once shared faded slowly, replaced by routine and silence. While the world saw them as a picture of stability, inside their home, the distance between them grew wider with every passing year. As Faisal became more absorbed in his work, Samira found herself increasingly alone. Days turned into weeks without meaningful conversations or shared moments. She dedicated herself to caring for their children and maintaining the household, but no amount of effort could fill the emptiness she felt. The once lively home now felt like a place of routine and obligation. Samira missed the companionship and warmth that had faded from her marriage. While she remained faithful to her duties, her heart began to long for something more, something she couldn't find in her isolated world. His void set the stage for decisions she would later regret, choices that would change her life forever. Amir, Faisal's father, was a respected figure both in the family and the community. In his early 60s, he carried himself with confidence and authority, a man whose opinions were rarely questioned. He had always been kind to Samira, offering advice and support during family gatherings. Unlike Faisal, whose focus was consumed by work, Amir paid attention to the small things, how Samira managed the household, cared for her children, and handled life on her own. His admiration for her grew over time, and what started as fatherly concern began to shift into something far less innocent. Samira, too, noticed his attentiveness, and in her loneliness, she welcomed the validation that Faisal no longer provided. Unbeknownst to the family, this bond would soon become a dangerous connection. What began as innocent conversations during family gatherings gradually turned into something far more personal. Amir often found reasons to linger when Samira was around, his words carefully chosen to show support and admiration. Samira, feeling unseen and undervalued by Faisal, found comfort in the attention Amir gave her. Their talks became longer, their exchanges more meaningful, and the connection between them grew stronger. Neither of them spoke openly about what was happening, but their actions said enough. Small moments, an extra glance, a kind word, a quiet laugh, were the beginning of a relationship that crossed boundaries. What once seemed like harmless gestures turned into something neither of them could control. By 2010, the relationship between Samira and Amir had moved well beyond simple family interactions. Their connection had deepened into a dangerous bond that neither could deny. The brief exchanges during gatherings turned into stolen moments of privacy. Their words carried unspoken meanings, and their eyes revealed emotions they could no longer hide. Amir, despite his age and position, felt drawn to Samira in ways he knew were wrong. Samira, in turn, found herself conflicted, torn between guilt over her actions and the comfort she found in Amir's attention. They justified their growing closeness as harmless, but deep down, both knew they had crossed a line. What began as quiet companionship was now something forbidden, and the consequences of their choices loomed closer with every passing days. The bond with Amir deepened. Samira found herself battling an intense inner struggle. Her faith and values told her what she was doing was wrong, Yet the loneliness and neglect she felt at home made it hard to pull away. She spent sleepless nights wrestling with her guilt, praying for guidance, and asking for forgiveness. But the cycle of temptation always returned. Each time she resolved to end the connection, she found herself drawn back in, unable to resist the comfort Amir provided. The weight of her actions grew heavier by the day, leaving her feeling trapped in a life she no longer recognized. Her heart was torn between the roles she had always honored and the emotions she couldn't seem to escape. As their relationship intensified, Amir and Samira became increasingly bold. What began as stolen moments during family events soon turned into secret meetings away from prying eyes. They found excuses to see each other, brief visits when Faisal was away, or quick encounters in quiet parts of the family home. Over time, these meetings grew riskier. They started meeting in secluded areas, like empty parks at night or deserted parts of the family estate, convincing themselves that no one would ever find out. The thrill of secrecy blinded them to the danger of their actions. While they believed they were careful, their behavior was starting to change, and the cracks in their facade were becoming harder to hide. Faisal, though often preoccupied with work, began to notice subtle changes in Samira's behavior. She seemed distant, her once warm and attentive demeanor replaced by distraction and avoidance. Their conversations grew shorter, and she rarely made eye contact anymore. At first, Faisal brushed it off as stress from managing the household, but small details started to stand out. Samira's responses to his questions felt rehearsed, and her actions became harder to predict. Faisal couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. When his sister Aisha mentioned seeing unusual glances between Samira and Amir at a family gathering, Faisal dismissed it, not wanting to believe anything was wrong. Still, the seed of doubt had been planted, and from that moment, he started paying closer attention. As time passed, the secrecy surrounding Samira and Amir's connection began to unravel. Family members started noticing subtle but suspicious behaviors. Amir's lingering presence around Samira during gatherings, and the quiet exchanges between them didn't go unnoticed. Aisha, Faisal's observant younger sister, grew particularly concerned. She couldn't ignore the way Amir's demeanor changed when Samira was near, or how Samira seemed unusually attentive to him. These observations sparked quiet whispers among family members, though no one wanted to confront the issue directly. Aisha finally voiced her concerns to Faisal, who, despite his growing unease, dismissed her words. Yet, the doubts in his mind grew stronger, making him more watchful of what was happening in his own home. By 2011, the atmosphere in Faisal and Samira's home had shifted noticeably. While Faisal continued to spend long periods away on business, he couldn't ignore the unease he felt when he was home. Samira, once welcoming and eager to share details about her day, now seemed distant and preoccupied. She often avoided meaningful conversations and retreated into herself. Faisal started noticing small inconsistencies in her behavior, unusual outings, guarded phone calls, and a reluctance to discuss anything beyond surface-level topics. At the same time, family gatherings became more uncomfortable for Samira. The strain of maintaining her double life was starting to show, and she couldn't shake the feeling that others were watching her more closely. Aisha's earlier remarks had stirred subtle suspicions within the family, creating a tense and uneasy dynamic. Samira's growing detachment and Faisal's heightened awareness set the stage for an emotional confrontation that was now only a matter of time. By early 2014, Faisal's unease had turned into full-blown suspicion. He began noticing patterns he had previously overlooked: Samira's frequent absences, her guarded phone habits, and the way she ended calls abruptly when he entered the room. She had become increasingly withdrawn, avoiding not only him but also the children. Faisal couldn't ignore the growing disconnect, and his instincts told him something was deeply wrong. One evening, while Samira was out running errands, Faisal decided to check her phone. What he found confirmed his worst fears. Messages between Samira and Amir, filled with undeniable evidence of their secret relationship, laid everything bare. The betrayal hit him like a storm, unraveling years of trust in an instant. Yet, Faisal didn't confront Samira immediately. Instead, He kept his discovery to himself, allowing his anger and heartbreak to simmer as he tried to process the depth of the deception. Basil's patience ran out on a night that started like any other, but ended in chaos. Returning home earlier than expected from a business trip, he walked into an unsettling silence. The children were staying with his sister, and the house felt unusually still. As Faisal moved through the rooms, he heard muffled voices coming from the guest room, voices that sent a chill down his spine. He approached quietly, his heart pounding, and found the door slightly open. What he saw inside confirmed his worst fears. Samira and Amir together in a moment of intimacy. The betrayal from not just his wife, but his own father, hit Faisal like a tidal wave. Rage consumed him, and before he could think, he burst into the room. The confrontation was explosive, with Faisal shouting in anger and disbelief. Samira tried to explain, but her words were drowned out by Faisal's fury. The years of hurt and suspicion erupted in that moment, shattering any semblance of control. The scene marked the breaking point in a tragedy that had been building for years. Overwhelmed by rage and heartbreak, Faisal acted in a way that would change his life forever. In the heat of the confrontation, his anger boiled over, and he grabbed a decorative knife from the wall, a family heirloom that once symbolized unity and tradition. Without thinking, he attacked Amir, his father, in a fit of uncontrollable violence. Each strike of the blade carried the weight of betrayal, humiliation, and the years of neglect and pain Faisal had endured. By the time he stopped, Amir lay lifeless on the floor, blood pooling around him. Samira, frozen in shock, could only scream as she watched the scene unfold. The once peaceful family home was now the site of a brutal crime. Faisal, his emotions spent, collapsed to the floor beside his father's body. The reality of what he had done began to sink in, but it was too late to undo the damage. The betrayal, anger, and heartbreak had reached their ultimate and irreversible conclusion. The once quiet home was now filled with chaos. Neighbors, alarmed by Samira's screams and the commotion, called the authorities. Within minutes, police arrived to find Faisal sitting motionless on the floor, covered in blood, the knife lying beside him. Amir's lifeless body and Samira's shocked, tearful face painted a grim picture of the tragedy that had just unfolded. Faisal offered no resistance as he was taken into custody, his mind numb from the weight of his actions. The family's once respected name became the talk of the community, with whispers spreading rapidly about what had occurred. Meanwhile, Samira was left to face the enormity of the situation. Her actions and decisions had set off a chain of events that destroyed not only her family, but also her reputation. What had once been a seemingly normal household was now shattered beyond repair, and the fallout of the tragedy was only beginning to unfold. The news of the crime spread quickly through the community, leaving shock and disbelief in its wake. Faisal had been known as a respectable businessman, and his family was seen as one of stability and tradition. The revelation of an affair between Samira and Amir, followed by the violent confrontation, shattered that image completely. Neighbors, friends, and colleagues struggled to reconcile the Faisal they knew with the man now charged with murder. Speculation and gossip grew as people tried to piece together how such a scandal could happen within a family that seemed so well put together. Samira, once admired for her role as a devoted wife and mother, became the target of harsh judgment. Many in the community placed the blame squarely on her shoulders, seeing her actions as the root cause of the tragedy. Meanwhile, Faisal's crime was viewed by some as an act of emotional breaking, though it did little to lessen the weight of what he had done. The family's standing within the community was destroyed, leaving them isolated and tarnished. The authorities began piecing together the events that led to the tragedy, uncovering a story far more complicated than a single act of violence. Faisal, now in custody, cooperated with investigators, revealing details of the affair and the betrayal that had pushed him to his breaking point. Samira, too, was questioned extensively, her involvement in the affair exposed for all to see. Family members, neighbors, and friends were interviewed, their accounts painting a picture of growing tensions within the household. Evidence, including messages between Samira and Amir, corroborated Faisal's claims, leaving little doubt about the relationship that had been hidden for so long. The investigation was meticulous, laying bare the emotional, familial, and cultural conflicts that had built up over the years. By the time the case was ready for trial, the full scope of the tragedy had been revealed, leaving no part of the family's story untouched by scandal or heartbreak. When Faisal's case went to trial, it became a focal point for the entire community. The courtroom was packed with onlookers, eager to hear the shocking details of the affair and the tragic events that followed. As the evidence was presented, the betrayal Faisal had endured became clear, but the court also had to grapple with the severity of his actions. Faisal's defense leaned heavily on the emotional turmoil he had suffered, arguing that his actions were the result of years of neglect, suspicion, and ultimately the crushing discovery of his wife's affair with his father. Witness testimonies described a man pushed to his breaking point, while others painted a picture of a once happy family torn apart by betrayal. The trial revealed every painful detail of the relationship between Samira and Amir, exposing the family's private struggles to public scrutiny. The court ultimately recognized Faisal's emotional state but could not overlook the gravity of his crime. His sentencing reflected both an understanding of his pain and the need for justice, marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of a long road ahead for everyone involved. As the trial unfolded, attention shifted to Samira and her role in the tragedy. The affair with Amir was seen as the catalyst for the events that led to Amir's death. Public opinion turned harshly against her, with many blaming her for the destruction of the family. In the eyes of the court, her betrayal was not just a personal failing, but a breach of cultural and religious values that carried significant weight. Initially, Samira faced the possibility of the death penalty, her actions viewed as the root cause of the violent outcome. However, Faisal, despite his anger and heartbreak, pleaded for her life to be spared. His request for mercy swayed the court, leading to a reduced sentence of 10 years in prison. While her life was spared, the punishment left her isolated and disgraced. She lost her role as a mother, her standing in the community, and any chance of rebuilding her reputation. Samira's fate was sealed not just by the court's decision, but by the irreversible damage to her family and her name. She became a symbol of betrayal, her life defined by the choices that had led to so much pain. The tragedy left the family in ruins, with wounds too deep to heal. Amir's death shattered the family's foundation, severing relationships and leaving a void that could never be filled. Once a respected patriarch, Amir was now remembered for the betrayal that led to his downfall. His actions cast a long shadow over the family's name, tarnishing their reputation permanently. Faisal, though alive, was no longer the man he once was. His imprisonment meant his children would grow up without their father, and the respect he once commanded in the community was replaced by whispers of the crime he committed. For the children, the loss of both parents, their father to prison and their mother to disgrace, left them without the stability they had once known. The extended family struggled to cope with the public scandal. The once close bonds were strained, and some family members distanced themselves to avoid being associated with the controversy. What had been a family built on tradition and mutual respect was now a fractured group, each member left to deal with the aftermath in their own way. Faisal's life behind bars became a daily reminder of the choices that had destroyed his family. Sentenced to 15 years in prison, he found himself consumed by guilt and anger, unable to escape the memories of that fateful night. His cell, cold and confined, became a space for endless reflection. He replayed the moments leading up to the tragedy over and over, questioning how everything had gone so wrong. The betrayal by both his wife and father haunted him, but so did his own actions. While he had sought justice for his pain, the price he paid was his freedom and the loss of his family. Letters from his children were the only connection he had to the outside world, but the knowledge that they were growing up without him weighed heavily on his heart. Though some in the community sympathized with Faisal's emotional breaking point, others could not excuse his violent response. His imprisonment became a symbol of the lasting consequences of unchecked anger and betrayal. serving as a grim reminder of how a single moment can change everything. Samira's life in prison was marked by isolation and regret. Cut off from her children and the outside world, she had little to hold on to except the memories of the life she had destroyed. Once seen as a devoted wife and mother, she now bore the weight of being labeled as the woman who had caused the downfall of her family. In the silence of her cell, Samira had no distractions from her thoughts. She replayed the choices that led her here, struggling to reconcile the person she had been with the one she had become. Letters from her children were rare, and when they did arrive, they reminded her of what she had lost. The absence of their voices and presence left an ache that no amount of reflection could ease. Her name, once spoken with respect, had become synonymous with betrayal. Even in prison, she was treated with disdain by others who knew her story. Samira's punishment extended far beyond the bars of her cell. She was left to live with the knowledge that she had not only lost her freedom, but also the trust and love of those who once looked up to her. The story of Faisal, Samira, and Amir became a cautionary tale in the community. It highlighted the devastating consequences of betrayal, unchecked emotions, and the silence that allowed problems to fester. What began as neglect and loneliness spiraled into choices that no one could undo, ultimately leading to heartbreak, scandal, and loss. For Faisal, the tragedy served as a harsh reminder of the cost of unresolved issues within relationships. For Samira, it underscored the importance of confronting struggles instead of seeking solace in forbidden paths. Amir's actions, once admired as a family elder, became an example of how trust can be broken in ways that ripple far beyond one's intentions. The community, too, learned from the story, becoming more aware of the pressures and responsibilities within families. Yet, for many, it was a grim reminder of how quickly things can fall apart when respect, communication, and trust are lost. The family's downfall left scars not just on them, but also on everyone who watched it unfold, serving as a stark warning about the fragility of relationships and the destructive power of hidden truths. By the time the dust settled, the story of Faisal, Samira, and Amir had left an indelible mark on everyone connected to it. The family, once respected and admired, was now a fragmented shell of its former self. Faisal's imprisonment and Samira's disgrace became permanent reminders of how deeply betrayal can cut and how devastating its consequences can be. The children, caught in the middle, were left to navigate a life shaped by the choices of the adults around them. Extended family members struggled to move forward, their shared history now clouded by scandal and loss. The once close ties that bound them together had been replaced by distance and unresolved pain. For the community, the case remained a topic of discussion long after the trial concluded. Some viewed it as a failure of moral and familial values, while others saw it as a cautionary tale of unchecked emotions and unspoken struggles. In the end, the tragedy became more than just a story. It became a symbol of how easily lives can unravel when trust is broken and pain is left unaddressed. This devastating story of betrayal, heartbreak, and tragedy serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of trust, communication, and accountability in relationships. It's a story that warns us about the dangers of neglecting emotional needs, the destructive power of secrets, and the irreversible damage caused by unchecked anger. The lives destroyed by this tragedy leave us with hard lessons that can't be ignored. What happened to this family didn't just affect them, it sent shockwaves through their community and beyond, showing how personal choices can have far-reaching consequences. If stories like this resonate with you, help us share these important lessons by spreading awareness. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and follow for more cases that shed light on the complexities of human relationships and the choices that shape our lives.